Whatever your thoughts on modern Final Fantasy are, if you like it, you hate it, you're somewhere in the middle of all that, what's missing? Well, a fair amount. Some would argue turn-based combat is missing and should return, to which I agree, but a topic for another video. Or airships. Oh boy, airships, yes please. Final Fantasy and airships is a match made in heaven. But there's one thing that just one day disappeared from every Final Fantasy entry, something far more important than folks think. The overworld, or world map. Not just a map, a true overworld world map. Because whether you realize this or not, a mainline Final Fantasy hasn't had one since Final Fantasy IX. Now, before you start typing anything, what about Final Fantasy X? No, Final Fantasy X has a map, not a traversable world map. What about 12? Again, a map connecting zones, not a traversable world map. Oh, and what about Final Fantasy Type 0? Yes, it did have something very much akin to the classic world map. Firstly, that was a bit more similar to Dissidia Duodecim's world map and a tad bit different. Secondly, it was not a mainline Final Fantasy. But hey, if a world map inspired by that came along, well then hell yes, I'll take that. However, the last time a mainline Final Fantasy truly let you shrink down and explore the entire planet was over 25 years ago. And again, I truly think that folks underestimate just how important that actually was. Because the world map was not simply a means to reach one's destination on a map, it was world building. I can recall the first world map I ever saw in The Legend of Dragoon on a demo disc. And even though I had a brief moment with it in a brief little section, it felt like there was a massive world to still see. One criticism I often hear is that the world maps are somehow outdated, that they're a technical limitation from the PlayStation era, and as such, modern hardware has made them obsolete. Well, yes, granted, there is some truth to that. And yet, in that limitation had created one of the most distinct features from games of that type from that era. And rather than removing it because now you can, you keep it to retain that identity carved out from that limitation. An overworld or world map is one of the smartest design decisions modern Final Fantasy could make, just as it was a smart choice back then. If nothing else, for one very practical reason. Resources. Think about that. Rather than building every single pseudo-kilometer between every location, you don't have to. You build these amazing locations, the town, forests, dungeons, secret locations, caves, a spot not visible on the minimap that requires exploration, and then the world map connects them. Ironically, it would very likely save development time. It would allow developers to focus their resources where players actually spend most of their time, rather than trying to create massive stretches of realistic terrain simply because technology now allows it, aka Final Fantasy 15 for example, which I was a fan of, don't come at me. Sometimes realism isn't actually the most immersive solution. Sometimes, as in this case, abstraction is. But that's not even the biggest reason that I would want it to make a return. One of the prevailing reasons is imagination. Because as soon as Final Fantasy abandoned the world map, it lost a bit of something else. Wonder, fantasy, and their accompanying music. Each unique piece of music for each overworld made to suit that unique world. It tells you a story about this game, its aesthetic and its unique story. From Blue Fields to Over the Hill, each vastly different but each fitting their respective games and each uniquely displaying that world for you. You see, this is something about leaving Midgar for the first time in Final Fantasy VII, riding the trains across Final Fantasy VIII, or the moment you first leave Alexandria in Final Fantasy IX, and the scope of the world is open to you. It's how the world map not only gives you places to trek to, but it shows you what the world you're in is like. The world map of Final Fantasy VII is not like 8, and 8 is nothing like 9, and the world map by itself can give you a sense of that world. That first time you step out onto the world map, your experience is like, oh, there's a lot still to see, wow. And how early on in the games they tend to confine you to an area, giving you a sense of there's a lot more that you can't yet see. The world seemed massive, not because it literally is, but because your imagination fills in the gaps. That tiny village on the world map, you understand it's actually a full-on town. That mountain range, you know it's far larger than what you're seeing and impossible to cross. And once you get your airship, you can truly see that scale for yourself. The world map gets your imagination to participate, and I think that is lacking as of late. And because your imagination is doing a lot of work here, the the world somehow feels larger than modern open worlds ever do. I mean, OG Final Fantasy VII's world feels much larger than the likes of Final Fantasy 15 or 16, or even Final Fantasy VII Remake. I mean, Final Fantasy 15 has a lot more going on graphically and in the actual world, rather than some tiny world map. Yet 7 feels like an entire planet. For one, you aren't walking every single meter between locations, you're traveling across continents, crossing oceans, exploring an entire globe, opening up more of the world as you go. Your brain naturally scales everything up. Modern games tend to create enormous explorable maps, and they're really bloody cool, but they don't necessarily create enormous worlds. And on a massive hero's journey with your party like Final Fantasy, the world has to be your playground. You see, there's a difference. A huge map doesn't automatically feel like a believable world per se. It often feels like a really large level, which is fine, that's usually its purpose. The world map, however, solved that decades ago. It made the world feel complete, not partially explored. You weren't traveling through one contained kingdom, you were traveling around the world. And it felt like it. Every landmass, the oceans, the world over, varying civilizations, some games more than others, the world felt inhabited, lived in. Like millions of people existed beyond the places you visited. That's incredibly powerful world building. It also made the adventure itself feel larger. More at stake even. It's like, do you remember when you finally got your airship, suddenly the entire planet opened up? You weren't unlocking another area, you were unlocking the freedom to traverse all of what you struggled to make your way through before. Seeing all that you trekked through from a different perspective and how that changes your perception of that world. Finding new places you didn't even know existed prior. You'd fly over continents you'd previously only crossed on foot, discover an island or archipelago that you never noticed before. Secret caves, tiny villages, optional bosses. The world itself became something to explore. Not simply a route between story objectives. That sense of discovery I genuinely miss. And I've seen folks online talk about this, saying things like modern games would look strange with a world map akin to Final Fantasy VIII. I completely disagree. A world map doesn't have to look like it did in 1999. Imagine, if you will, something a little closer to the likes of Dissidia Duodecim, stylized miniature world. Or even, as others have pointed out, Clair Obscur, something artistic rather than literal. It can be done. It can be reinterpreted. One doesn't need tiny blocky mountains anymore. You can preserve the feeling while modernizing the presentation. The concept isn't outdated, only the presentation is. So, I think Final Fantasy has slowly drifted away from fantasy, or at least that unique version of fantasy that they themselves helped carve out. Final Fantasy's core elements are still there, but its sense of scale, wonder, and fantasy are a little bit lacking lately. Older Final Fantasy games felt like a true long journey across an entire world, a long grueling journey for the character and party. Modern entries often feel like journeys across very detailed regions. There might be a subtle difference depending on who you ask, but it's one I feel every time I replay the classics. Crossing a continent on foot, taking flight in an airship, landing somewhere completely unexplored. Realizing you found a location that is not on the map, those moments were part of the overall fantasy experience. Ultimately, I don't want the world map back because I'm simply nostalgic, though there's likely a fair amount of that there. I want to see its return because I genuinely believe it's a great game design. It creates stronger world building, it makes the planet feel larger, it encourages exploration, it gives the player a sense of geography, makes every new vehicle feel meaningful, and also, it could reduce unnecessary development overhead. And perhaps most importantly, it gives something back that I think Final Fantasy has been missing for a very long time. A sense of wonder and imagination. Because let's be fair, sometimes the most believably lived-in world, the most fantastical world, isn't the one that shows you everything in graphical detail, it's the one that leaves just enough for your imagination to fill in the gaps, to do the heavy lifting. And that's something the older Final Fantasy world maps did well. Yes, because of limitation, but they were smart enough to do that well. And it became a part of its identity for a very long time. Bring it back.